Thank you, John. You flatter me with your introduction. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone from a not so sunny, in fact, quite chilly Malawi this morning. I think that despite what John says, I think most people here have not quite come to listen to me drone on. So I'm going to go ahead and let my panelists introduce themselves, starting with James from de Havilland, Canada. Go on, James.
Fantastic, Sean. So firstly, I'd like to thank our hosts from Madagascar, as well as our AviaDev team. It's been a fantastic 2 days so far, very insightful. So greetings from as well a rather overcast Nairobi, a bit chilly for our weather at this time of the year. I am the sales director for Africa for the de Havilland Aircraft of Canada Limited. Been with them for coming up to 2 years now. Prior to that, I was with the leasing company GCAS. So looking forward to the sessions, Sean. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, James. Let's move on to Gad from Embraer.
And very good morning and good afternoon to you all. My name is Gad Wavomba, the Sales Director Africa for Embraer, here in very warm Dubai, United Arab Emirates. Looking forward to the discussion today and the engagement, and a very big thanks to AviaDev and our host in Madagascar. Thank you.
Excellent, Gad, welcome. And last but not least, let's go over to Jean-Paul from Mitsubishi.
Hi, guys. Like Gad, a very warm and sunny Dubai. I think I should take the opportunity to just make sure I update everyone on what's going on here. So first, John, thank you for the invite and the participation in this OEM panel. I would say that I used to be an OEM, looking at the back history, having been with Airbus and then with the defunct Bombardier. Joined Mitsubishi at the time when Bombardier decided to terminate every civil aircraft program, and then when we joined Mitsubishi, we thought that it would be exciting to promote a new product that was in the papers for years, but Mitsubishi has decided to shelve this program as well. So today I would say that I'm an OEM by heart. Although my background comes from an airline, and today what we have decided to do is to bring this knowledge and experience and work that had been done with all the airlines in the continent and elsewhere to the service of those airlines as a consultant, being able, without any how can I say, being not neutral on the OEM side. Bring some knowledge, evaluations, any type of consulting services that are required in the field of selections, of traffic analysis, network planning, and all that jazz. So quite exciting to be on that side as well, and at the same time still being involved with the manufacturer in advising what the market needs actually. So that's where we are today, and that's the point.
Fascinating. You know, as you say, you may not be an OEM anymore, but you're definitely an OE support provider. And I think that's a very important thing as we'll come through some of our discussions here. But, you know, let's get the audience involved a bit here, and let's lead off with a poll question for everyone. And that poll question is something that, a lot of people are asking now, and that is, what aircraft type is likely to be the most in demand among African operators during the recovery period for COVID-19? Now, I know the poll is not very scientific right now, but, you guys can take some notes and say, hey, we need to build more of these if you're not already building them. So your choices are regional jets or turboprops, narrow bodies or wide bodies. And we'll give it a few more seconds here before John and the team in London close it off from further voting.
Okay, everyone, 10 more seconds. Oh no, we've closed it. Right, there you go, Sean.
Well, I think unsurprisingly, I think, and very gladly, I can see all my panelists are smiling here. The answer seems to be overwhelmingly in favor of regional jets and turboprops. And that is a very good point. Let's jump into our first discussion topic, which is about right sizing. This has become a bit of a buzzword in the industry, and especially for airlines in Africa in the post-COVID era. Do you agree with the consensus generally that regional aircraft, whether that's regional jets, whether that's turboprops, whether that's even smaller commuter aircraft, are likely to be in greater demand in the near to medium future in Africa? And let's get Gad into this as Embraer has a portfolio of regional products that they can offer.
We sure do. And I think it's a very valid question for today, what we're dealing with this unfortunate pandemic. I think it starts with, the actual definition of right sizing, because as you mentioned, it is a buzzword that's been around for some time, and it's to convert something to an appropriate or optimum size. And we are definitely seeing that even pre-COVID. At Embraer, we used this term actually while marketing our first generation Embraer E-Jet, the E1, back in the early 2000s. With the E2, it took up some momentum and we continued pushing this term. I think now with the pandemic, and specifically in Africa, there is an opportunity for the airlines on the continent to refleet and rethink about how they can right size what they currently had over the last 15, 20, 30 years, and perhaps enter into the next stage of aircraft that could be a lot more economical and have the sufficient load factors for the continent. I think yesterday, Ogaga Ujo did a great job showing the state of the industry, showing that the load factors back in pre-COVID were about 60% in Africa, globally 80%. So that load factor gap is still quite large. And right sizing supports increasing connectivity, closing that load factor gap, and also increasing profitability. So I think to answer your question, yes, definitely greater demand. And you're seeing it from Embraer and also the other OEMs who have aircraft in the 150 seat market and below.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I tend to personally agree with you almost completely on that front, as has been discussed on LinkedIn in recent days. But let's go over to James and see what DHC's views on this are.
No, absolutely, Sean. Look, I would have to, agree with Gad. Even currently, the importance of a well-connected domestic network, as well as a regional network, as the traffic slowly comes back, cannot be stated further. The Dash 8 family of aircraft currently plays a very important role in the Africa region. We've got over 160 Dash 8 aircraft serving both the short-haul, domestic and intra-regional routes for many countries. And it's due to the attributes that you find with the Dash 8 aircraft. You've got the range, you've got aircraft accessibility, especially in the Africa region, where we have well-documented infrastructure challenges. You've got the short takeoff and landing characteristics. You've got the hot and high performance, and as well as we saw in the video played on day one and well articulated by the CEO of 748 Services, Air Services, in the video interview with John Howell that came out last week. If you haven't watched it, I'd tell you to please watch it. It shows the nimbleness that an airline can be accorded, especially in these times, with the use of the Dash 8 400 aircraft, pivoting very well from serving the humanitarian and cargo aspects that came into the fore, especially during the COVID pandemic, as airlines were looking to shore up their revenues. And then you've got the quick change characteristics where you can quickly move between cargo and passengers. And, we've got a great example in 748, which is an airline that during the ongoing pandemic is actually positioning itself. You know, they've moved offices, they've invested, they've backed themselves, moved offices to the main airport at Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, and have started serving domestic routes with an eye on the future through the use of the Dash 8-400 product. So it is, you know, it cannot be overstated. It's absolutely provides the nimbleness and the right size that the current environment accords us.
Now, fascinating to hear about, you know, how some airlines are actually seeing the pandemic as an opportunity to reinvent themselves and, you know, take advantage of the situation rather than just crying out for more state subsidies.
Absolutely.
But Jean-Paul, let's go on to you, because I can see you've been grinning through some of the comments being made by the other two.
Yeah, definitely. And as I said initially, wanted to be neutral, obviously, and I said, well, if we look, if we're looking at building something that will serve Africa in the long term, I think the airlines need to operate definitely the right size aircraft, and the reasons are simple. Frequencies are needed to attract new travelers, ensure competitive market share. If you look at today in Africa, the per day each way traffic is not enough to provide adequate enough load factor for large single aisle aircraft. And I would like to quote yesterday Jonathan from Lyft when he's saying that network is something that they're looking at in terms of their development, and he did say that the aircraft they operate today, the A320 in a single aisle in the single class configuration, is a bit too large, and aircraft size is key, obviously, to minimize the risk of operating an empty aircraft. So yes, airlines are definitely impacted by the lack of traffic, which has many how can I say, reasons in Africa not to develop. I've seen some exchanges on charts about the fifth freedom traffic in between the airline, but there's so many ways to tackle that. And I think that if we were to look at an aircraft manufacturer position, I think the aircraft design selection is critical in building profitable airline and profitable markets. If you look in Africa, giving the high fuel cost, the maintenance, the operating costs in Africa, which are high, if the aircraft is not right size, then you cannot maintain high load factor without aggressive fare discounting, and you cannot protect your yields. So I think that if today I were in the shoes of my colleagues here, I think that the aircraft that should be put on the market today or should be offered to the airline should be smaller, should be even more fuel efficient. They should offer passenger a superior flying experience, which would justify maybe a rational fare structure. And definitely those aircraft should adapt to a small mid-size airport as well as larger hubs. So there's a lot of work for my colleagues OEM today, without naming anyone. That yes, there's a lot of things. I'd like to say one thing, maybe specific to Gad at Embraer. You guys in the last 10-15 years have done a fantastic job in putting the 135 and the 145 on the market. Those aircraft have served Africa and the African airline to grow. Sure, you're not gonna say the opposite of this. You've been operating those, but those aircraft potentially needs to be replaced with somebody that potentially have a better passenger appeal, continue to offer lower cost of operation and so on. So there's a lot of jobs for you guys to produce the right airplane to replace all those.
Now, I think you make some very good points. And in fact, that leads us into, another point that I wanted to discuss here. And I think there's been a lot of focus here on the trip costs and, why right sizing is important, just so that you're filling up smaller planes rather than operating larger planes half empty. But one of the things which is a controversial discussion, especially in Africa, is whether it's important to have new planes or whether pre-owned aircraft are more suitable to the African market. And certainly new aircraft have their advantages in terms of lower maintenance costs, sometimes better fuel efficiency. However, as Noel said in one of the previous discussions, African airlines often struggle to get adequate utility out of their aircraft due to infrastructure and security limitations at many destinations. In fact, I'd say most destinations within Africa. Do you think that airlines, and specifically state-owned airlines here, because those are the ones who tend to have the open checkbook which they can write, and I know that you guys spend a lot of your time or have spent a lot of your time trying to convince the state-owned airlines to open up their checkbooks, but do you think as someone supporting the industry that airlines in Africa should focus more on pre-owned aircraft, or should they focus more on brand new aircraft so that they can minimize and optimize the ownership component of their unit costs? And I'm going to throw it to Mr. Neutral here, which is Jean-Paul, to open up this discussion.
I would say it's a combination of both. First of all, you would not have expected another answer probably, but it's a combination of both. Number one, although today I assume the OEMs have some backlog to dispose and have aircraft available, the lead time to get a new aircraft is sometime was pretty long. I mean, from what I recall during my days, and then obviously the airlines have issues to tackle on a day-to-day basis, and they need to make decisions, and they need to make proper planning. So definitely a new aircraft rather than a 50-year-old operation would provide the comfort level that I was talking about just earlier, especially for the business class travel. And in Africa, this is a key point which brings high yield. But at the same time, yes, we'll provide a much lower operating costs in terms of fuel burn and so on and so forth. But today, still in the second-hand market, there are very interesting products that are still interesting to operate and would bring the value for the money that is required. But definitely, for me, and the point here, since it's in this panel, I'm surrounded by regional aircraft player. Definitely, I think the regional jets are the obvious choice for an airline fleet planner. They are cheaper to operate, and I would think a point that you mentioned in your question, Sean, which is for me critical. It's that question of seat mile cost versus trip cost. A lot of airlines are focusing on trip costs and are saying, yeah, we on seat costs, and say, yeah, we need an A320 of that capacity, blah blah, because the seat cost of that aircraft is much lower. Yes, for sure. In that case, you can take an A380 and flying, even if you fly it empty, the seat cost of an A380 is going to be competitive. But at the end of the day, what matters is what much it costs me to fly from A to B, and if I fit it up, then I have more chances to be profitable. So I think that in Africa, trip cost is the key. And to answer this, I think that both OEMs on the panel and the other ones have aircraft that are still within the 10 years range that satisfies that. And if the airline can have the financing to get a new one, then I would go for the best.
No, I think you make some excellent points there. And, James, you've got some aircraft which are running out there, which are coming up on about 50 years old. So, I could assume that you're also probably a fan of the aftermarket, but let's see what your views are. How does the early model Dash 8s and the modern Q400s compare?
Now, look, Sean, let me take a step back and, if I may, to answer that question. We all know about a decade or more ago, the African aviation market unfortunately had a bad rep, and everyone was tainted with the same brush. African aviation was viewed as primarily unsafe. It was viewed as a quote unquote dumping ground of very aged aircraft. And so I think to differentiate themselves and to provide comfort to customer concerns. I think airlines that had the ability to raise the financing looked to newer aircraft to differentiate themselves from that. Now, the market has come in leaps and bounds forward. You know, we've got well-established operators with world-class operations, with maintenance facilities available to all operators across the continent that are similar to those found, you know, in international markets. So having said that, if I dive right in, you know, whether it's a new or a pre-owned aircraft, Sean, both have their economic capabilities. And I think one has to really consider their intended model of operation and, as I say, availability of financing. Now, if I go to the crux of the matter in the question, as correctly stated, if there is limited utilization, of course, it would be more optimal to have a lower fixed cost operation, which can be achieved through pre-owned aircraft. And again, we've got very good examples on the continent of operators who are taking advantage of this. You know, you've got our good friends, and Joao, the CEO of LAM, was being interviewed earlier with by Ato Girma. And, you know, LAM is a very good example of an airline that's taking advantage of pre-owned aircraft to service its scheduled routes, as well as take advantage of a niche operation out in the north, which is providing services for the oil and gas operators. On the other hand, Sean, you know, new aircraft certainly and absolutely come with their benefits that do lower the fixed cost of the operation. You know, you look at the extended warranties and the lower initial maintenance costs, you know, that are accorded over the first 8 to 12 years, you know, which all allow for the increased rates of utilization and better returns of investment. You know, Sean, if I just take it a bit further, I would say, you know, operators, and I would argue operators really need to look at all their possible limitations in the areas of operation, especially across our geographically diverse and varied continent. You know, you have areas where you're operating into and out of hot and high areas across the region, and some aircraft types do face restrictions, or, you know, flying during the hot midday sun, the hot midday African sun. And so these limitations do not generally apply to the Dash 8-400 aircraft, owing to its excellent hot and high performance characteristics. So I'd say, Sean, in a nutshell, there is merits for both, but one really has to take a look at their operating environment and their operating model.
Excellent points all through. And I just want to add one little tidbit. When you mentioned the safety concerns about Africa and how all African airlines used to be tarred with the same brush of negative safety reputations, it's an interesting bit of trivia that African airlines today are actually statistically safer than the world average. So Africa has gone from lagging the world to now maybe not quite leading the world, but definitely in the upper echelon of that. And I think a big reason for that has been, you know, as you say, the more focus on the types of aircraft coming in and so forth. So I'm going to throw it at Embraer, because you guys have a whole bunch of brand new aircraft types coming into the Africa region and undergoing proving flights and things right now. What do you think right now on the conundrum, or not necessarily conundrum, maybe even the complement of new versus pre-owned airframes?
Look, I think, you know, to my colleagues as well on the panel, it's a mix of both. There's no one solution for Africa. It all depends on the objective of the airline, which is our customers. When we specifically talk about state airlines, which you've mentioned, you know, state airlines, they need to be able to do their math and see whether or not those justifications weigh out in terms of profitability or not. That is key, is profitability. And sometimes in a situation where, in our situation at Embraer, we do have a large market of pre-owned aircraft that we are placing all across the globe. In Africa, we see an opportunity for the second and third lives of our E1s, and also for our ERJs to come to the continent, which we've done a very great job placing those. I think globally, around 60 aircraft globally, and we have a pipeline of those aircraft coming to the continent today. But when you look at the state airlines, I think they need to be able to decide and do the math, whether the new aircraft makes sense, because it could, when you bring in the better economics, as Jean-Paul mentioned, and the range capabilities, and the comfort for passengers, and as well as the potential deals that they can be able to garner from their governments, it could be a profitable and better solution. However, when you look at non-state airlines, it could be the same thing, right? And so I think a good example is our largest customer, Airlink, who is now one of the leading Embraer customers globally. They operate almost 30 ERJs, coming up to probably around 45 or so in total, including E-jets. They were able to really do a great job placing used pre-owned assets and run that operation and bring connectivity to the rest of the region at a very good, affordable cost base. But then we have customers, as Sean, you mentioned, we did a fantastic job in the pandemic being able to sell aircraft to Air Peace and Congo Airways, brand new. Air Peace has received, I believe, the third aircraft already. And this is phenomenal. And I think for them and those airlines, it's a different objective. It's a different strategy and way forward. And I think their models as airlines are a bit different, and they're wanting to achieve something else. So I think overall, it's a mix. And I think it really goes back to what is the objective of the customer. And as OEMs, we need to understand that, and we need to pair that objective of the customer to making sure that our products and capabilities are being mapped so that they can be able to meet what they would ultimately want to see with those assets. And at Embraer, luckily, we have the assets all the way from the Brasilia, which we have the largest amount of Brasilias operating in Africa, all the way to our second generation E2, which we have 2 customers already that are going to be receiving more deliveries this year, and a pipeline of customers beyond that.
Yeah, excellent points, and I tend to agree with all of them as well. And I'm just looking at the chat and some comments over here, and one from David at Tuskar is interesting because that actually leads into another topic we have here, which is that the key is the cost of ownership, and the question is leased versus owned aircraft. And based on something that you were saying, Gad, many smaller operators in Africa enter into aircraft leases without really understanding the ramifications of these, and specifically with respect to maintenance reserves, return conditions, and so forth. And if you're not adequately accounting, you're not understanding what these are for, sometimes these costs, these so-called hidden costs, can cause a seemingly low lease rate to balloon into something unmanageable at the end of the lease. Is this something that you see OEMs in particular have a role to help educating operators on what the true cost of operating an airframe is? Is it more important to get the right airframe in, or is it more critical for you all to sell the airframe to them? And Gad, let's throw it at you, since you sort of inspired this with your last comments.
Sure, and I think it's important to make sure that everyone knows that as OEMs or supporters of OEMs, it is our job to educate and hold the hand of the customer, specifically when it comes to a customer that might not be familiarized with the expectations of returning an aircraft that's leased. Those lessors are also our customers for all of the OEMs. So we need to support them and make sure that we make sure that the customer isn't in a situation where things could end up going in a very difficult or bad situation. So I agree that we do need to hold the hand when necessary, and also be able to be that support system to guide them in the right direction. We've seen unfortunate cases, but I can say over the last probably 2 years, and I think to the credit of all the organizations and stakeholders, AFRA, AviaDev, AFCAC, et cetera, there's been a lot of lobbying and a lot of education being pushed to make sure that the states and the airlines understand the ramifications of leasing aircraft in the globe and all the necessary things that need to be done. So yep, I 100% agree that it is part of our jobs, and we need to be able to support in every way possible.
Yeah, interesting. And let's see what James has to say.
No, I absolutely have to agree with Gad. Sean, I'll bring here 3 points. Ethical selling is definitely one I'd bring up. I'd bring up partnership, and I'd bring up transparency. We're here for the long haul with the airline operators. It's incumbent on us to make sure that the operator succeeds, which then allows for us to then be able to go in and be able to place our aircraft ethically in multiple jurisdictions. And that speaks for itself. And in fact, what then happens is the operator then becomes the champion for the OEM. So ethical selling definitely high up there. Transparency is key. At de Havilland, as part of the sales and marketing process, we at the onset provide prospective operators with absolutely transparent information on the inherent costs of introducing the aircraft and the cost therein of operating our aircraft. That transparency is key.
Okay, I think we lost James temporarily. Jean-Paul, let's jump into you, and I'm sure James will rejoin us shortly.
Yeah, I wanted to actually challenge James because James he said that he was coming from GCAS. So obviously he knows that the business of a lessor is to make money where there are opportunities to make money. So obviously today the leasing market is a competitive market. If we look at the numbers from the date I started as an OEM and today, the proportion of aircraft that are in the hands of the lessors are probably now reaching 40 to 45%, if not more. So it's quite a challenge, obviously, for the OEM to go against the lessors, which are their customers, and obviously the OEM have an interest in having the lessors who are financing the aircraft out of the production line within the airline. And obviously, it becomes a business game on all the points that you addressed, Sean. Obviously, the role of the OEM is to help the airline in making sure that those hidden costs are not going to be hitting the image and the credibility of the product ultimately. But you have some airlines that are voluntarily choosing not to put maintenance reserves, to block these, to have the right people controlling the leases and so on. And then as an OEM, you cannot go against that. I mean, you cannot go to I'm going to take I don't want to make, no, actually, I'm not going to take any examples because I don't want anybody to think that I know what's happening in one airline or the other, but you cannot take an airline CEO and tell him, you must employ that guy, two person to control the leases and so on. Otherwise, you're going to get caught at the end. Because at the end, he's going to say, well, this is none of your business. This is my choice. So it's a pretty tricky situation, but definitely leasing, it's an off-balance sheet solution that can allow airline to quickly have access to an asset, to have access to financing, provided that the due diligences are met, and then obviously the lessor does his proper job, and at the same time, can answer the question that we were having earlier on, which is availability right now, while you are discussing with maybe the OEM and buy an aeroplane, which would consolidate your balance sheet. So it's really a financing issue and then a management issue within the airline on how to address the topics.
That's great. I've got an 8-minute warning coming up from John right now, so we're gonna go into the rapid fire rounds right now, and let's see. But drawing off that, in terms of what OEMs can do for support and so forth, and something we've seen, especially out of the Nigeria market in recent months, has been foreign exchange is a big challenge for African airlines who try to maintain their aircraft, try to put aside maintenance reserves and so forth. How can OEMs work with airlines to help transfer some of this currency risk away from the airlines? Could there be OEM sponsorship of MROs within Africa, domestically in some of the larger markets and so forth? Again, let's try and keep this down to a minute so we can get down to the last few topics we've had. Let's start with James, since you got cut off in your last answer.
Sorry, the gremlins in the system came up and I got cut off. So one of the solutions you can offer them is predictability of their costs. So we've got the de Havilland component spares program for parts and rotable repairs. And this provides operators with predictable costs. And that way you're able to match your cash flows, and it assists them in forecasting and indeed managing the FX requirements and being able to hedge out. So these are one of the few areas where we can help operators within the region manage their currency risks, John.
How about you, Gad? What has Embraer got to say on this?
Yeah, I mean, we have a similar program as well. We have a pool program. We have a material support program as well, which is very well recognized across the globe. But I think even more important to the bottom line is before you even get to operating the Embraer aircraft, it would be structuring the finance available to mitigate the risk of currency situation within the continent. And that's where Embraer has very, very good relationships with not only the banks overseas, but banks and financiers within Africa that can help support and structure transactions to place our Embraer aircraft, sometimes within local currency or a percentage of. Our customer finance department has done a great job being able to find solutions for our customers. And we continue to do so. And I think that's where it really will hit the bottom line of the customer from that perspective.
Now, and you know, as a former Embraer operator, I will speak very highly of Embraer support to operators in Africa. You guys have done a great job on that front, so good job. Jean-Paul, what are your views?
Well, it's very, very difficult not being involved, but definitely you're right. Nigeria is a challenging environment in a lot of aspects, and then obviously trigger a lot of issues in every side of the business, from procuring spares, having the right credit risk, and providing finance on the upper hand. But what I would say is definitely the role of the aircraft guys, the aircraft OEM guys, is to make sure that they can adapt to every cases. Every jurisdiction is unique. We've seen very difficult financing or arrangements being put together in Angola, for instance. Everybody talks about Nigeria, maybe because Nigeria is the biggest market in the continent, but wow, Angola, what a challenge! What a challenge to put together a financing structure there. What a challenge to do something, and I congratulate Joao for being so stubborn and in running his airline, because operating in Mozambique in every aspect is very complex. Getting a spare out of the custom on a timely manner is a challenge. So yes, OEMs have to be creative in making sure that they can support the airline right on the spot. Embraer has done a fantastic job in putting what they've put down there in Johannesburg with the partnership of Airlink in terms of flight training, in terms of spares. I remember we've been trying to do the same during my time at Bombardier when we pushed the simulator manufacturer to base a full flight simulator in Nairobi, Kenya. So yeah, the role is there to push the suppliers to be more amenable and responsive to the African market and requirements.
Okay, great. And we're down to the last couple of minutes, but I've got a question which I really need to ask, and I'm going to get Gad to respond to this one primarily. What do you see as the new technologies coming out? And I'm throwing this at Embraer because you guys have some of the most exciting new projects out there with the Embraer VTOL and the E3 turboprop and stuff like that. What do you see happening with these new products in Africa, not immediately, but over the next 10 to 15 years? Will electric aircraft be something we might see? Will other types of green tech become important in Africa? What do you see happening, Gad?
So you said 15 years, so let's be realistic. I think number one, you still will see ERJs, but phasing out. E1s, very popular. E2s, a bunch of them, so very excited about that, as I mentioned. And you will see the E3, our turboprop, which for those of you who have seen, we've teased and we've demonstrated that we are in the development stage of creating a new turboprop that can support our customers across the globe who will need to replace their existing turboprops. We see that globally, over the next 15 years, let's stick with that, around 1,600 turboprops will need to be replaced. And in Africa, there's a large amount of them. So we're very excited to be able to bring that new technology, still, of course, in the development stage. And of course, determining what type of engine will it be because of today's environmental targets and goals that everybody's trying to aim for. But very exciting time. And I think it will be great for us to now compete again with my colleagues on the panel, but also with ATR and others. In terms of the eVTOLs, those are the electric vertical and vertical takeoff and landing flying taxis. We have a sub company within Embraer called Eve, and we have put that in place. We're already in the process of signing MOUs with airlines, which is very exciting. And we see there is going to be a future of those type of flying vehicles taking you from, say, and let's just keep this in Africa, from Sandton in Johannesburg to Johannesburg or Tambo International Airport to connect you onto an Airlink Embraer to Entebbe or to Cape Town. So a lot of things I think in the next 15 years will be developed, and we're very excited to be engaging with all of our C-level executives that are customers and potential future customers regarding these topics.
Excellent. Always good to end up on a positive note. And, I think Clive said in the comments that perception is everything. So we're going to stick to the African perception and end this exactly with an on-time arrival. Thanks very much to James, Jean-Paul, and Gad for this. And I'm going to hand it back to John in the London studio.